This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell here in London, outside Buckingham Palace. In just moments, Britain's King Charles III will speak to the British people and the world for the first time as king. It was recorded earlier today in the Blue Drawing Room here at Buckingham Palace. And the people you can see outside are in mourning for the only monarch that most of them have ever known. And even though at 96 years old, this moment was inevitable, many here still in shock because it's hard to imagine the country without her. She was, for Britain, reliable, steadfast, and committed. The Queen was a constant presence in a changing world. Well, now, a new age under a new king. In his speech today, King Charles will pay tribute to the Queen, his mother, and pledge his duty as the new monarch. We actually saw King Charles and Camilla, the new Queen consort, here at Buckingham Palace a few hours ago to chants of "God Save the King." Imagine the first time that has been uttered in more than 70 years. There you can hear it. The new king shook hands with some of the thousands of people outside mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth. There was even a moment when one woman embraced him for a kiss. Churches and public buildings around Britain rang their bells at noon local time, followed an hour later by a 96-gun salute here in London, one round for each year of the Queen's life. King Charles has just met with Britain's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was formally appointed by the Queen only 3 days ago. Duty in many ways in the face of mourning. I want to bring in CBS News royal contributor Julian Payne. He joins me here in London, and he was the former communications director for the Prince of Wales. Now, King Charles III. That's quite a heady moment, even to say it, isn't it? I'm sure.
Quite a change.
Yes,
quite
for someone
a
who worked so closely with him. And I know you've spoken with him in the past about what this moment would mean. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Unlike his mother, or indeed his grandfather, this is a moment that he always knew was coming to him. Of course, history had to change for Queen Elizabeth to become our sovereign. In his case, he's always known this was coming. And in that regard, he's had a long time to think about what this moment will mean, how he'll want to take on this role as sovereign, as King Charles III, as he now is. And I think he's always had in his mind what these first few days will need to do. My sense is it will be in his mind reassurance, stability, continuity. All these things will be at the forefront of his mind. And of course, don't forget, this is all happening at the same time as he's dealing with the very real emotional challenge of having lost his own mother. So I have no doubt he's got a very clear sense of how the next few days will go. But I think there'll be a battle there as well for him emotionally. Yeah,
something no one is ever prepared for is the loss of a parent and a family member, and he's got to, of course, address the world. What do you think he'll want to signal about the monarchy and the future of the monarchy in this address?
Well, let's be absolutely clear. These are historic words. This is the first time we have heard a new monarch speak in this country for more than 70 years. I have absolutely no doubt he's aware of the sort of weight of history sitting there. I am sure he will want to talk about his mother. He'll want to venerate her memory. And I think he'll also want to set out a little bit about how he will want to take things forward. Those two things will, I think, be the main things that we'll hear from him very shortly.
And then after this speech to the nation, to the world, what happens next?
Well, you'll see over the next 10 days, two things are happening, really. We are looking at the end of the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, and that story as she is ultimately buried, and at the same time you see the new reign beginning. So you will see the new sovereign will begin to travel around the UK. You will see him talking to people, meeting people, and very, very quickly you're going to start to get a sense of this new reign and how it's going to look and feel.
Will he continue? Oh, and we're getting the word that the speech is coming just shortly now. Our understanding is it's maybe under about 10 minutes long. Let's listen in now, as many people are sitting down to hear him for the first time as king.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration, an example to me and to all my family. And we owe her the most heartfelt debt any family could owe to their mother, for her love, affection, guidance, understanding, and example. Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. Alongside the personal grief that all my family are feeling, we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries where the Queen was head of state, in the Commonwealth and across the world, a deep sense of gratitude for the more than 70 years in which my mother, as Queen, served the people of so many nations. In 1947, on her 21st birthday, she pledged in a broadcast from Cape Town to the Commonwealth to devote her life, whether it be short or long, to the service of her peoples. That was more than a promise. It was a profound personal commitment which defined her whole life. She made sacrifices for duty. Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered through times of change and progress, through times of joy and celebration, and through times of sadness and loss. In her life of service, we saw that abiding love of tradition, together with that fearless embrace of progress, which makes us great as nations. The affection, admiration, and respect she inspired became the hallmark of her reign. And as every member of my family can testify, she combined these qualities with warmth, humor, and an unerring ability always to see the best in people. I pay tribute to my mother's memory, and I honor her life of service. I know that her death brings great sadness to so many of you, and I share that sense of loss beyond measure with you all. When the Queen came to the throne, Britain and the world were still coping with the privations and aftermath of the Second World War, and still living by the conventions of earlier times. In the course of the last 70 years, we have seen our society become one of many cultures and many faiths. The institutions of the state have changed in turn. But through all changes and challenges, our nation and the wider family of realms, of whose talents, traditions, and achievements I am so inexpressibly proud, have prospered and flourished. Our values have remained and must remain constant. The role and the duties of monarchy also remain, as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England, the church in which my own faith is so deeply rooted. In that faith and the values it inspires, I have been brought up to cherish a sense of duty to others and to hold in the greatest respect the precious traditions, freedoms, and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary government. As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation, And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavor to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others. This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my Queen Consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. In a little over a week's time, we will come together as a nation, as a Commonwealth, and indeed a global community, to lay my beloved mother to rest. In our sorrow, let us remember and draw strength from the light of her example. On behalf of all my family, I can only offer the most sincere and heartfelt thanks for your condolences and support. They mean more to me than I can ever possibly express. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
And there it is. The world hears for the first time from King Charles III talking about his profound sadness at the loss of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. He talked about her devotion, that her devotion to her country never wavered, in his words. And then he also talked about his own role. He talked about the people of the Commonwealth and that he would do his best to serve them. And then he talked a little bit about what his own role may be. I want to bring in Julian, who remains here with us because you worked so closely with then Prince Charles. First, he talked about the charities. He is well known for his involvement in charities, including on the issue of climate change. What did you make of that particular reference there?
Well, look, I think that was an extraordinary speech. There was a lot in there. If we go into that point in particular, he's sending messages in this speech. So one of the most important things he's saying is, my role is changing. So the work that I do, raising money, the philanthropic work I do, I will now have to do less of. There are other people now, and he referenced his son, the Duke of Cambridge, now Prince of Wales, who will take on some of that work. So he's saying very clearly, I'm stepping away from this work and I will now be focusing on the role of sovereign. He also talked, of course, about the role of sovereign and the constitutional boundaries. So he was, again, making it absolutely clear he knows there are restrictions that have to be respected when you are sovereign. You can be a campaigning prince as Prince of Wales, but when you become king, the time is there for you then to sort of think about how you can speak out on things or the way you can do it, because that role is different. And I think that's really important that we heard that there today.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine most people in this country, because it's just after 6 o'clock before dinner time, are all sitting in their living rooms and have watched this.
Oh, I mean, I think there was 30 plus million people watching the news last night. I've absolutely no doubt that that will have happened again. I mean, this is history happening in this country this evening. I've absolutely no doubt. And how nice that you heard there the first things that the new king speak about was his love for his mother. And then towards the end, we heard him talk about his love for his mother and his father. And of course, dotted through that were references to family throughout. Mm-hmm. I was really interested to see how careful he was to speak of not just the Duke of Cambridge, now Prince of Wales, but also Harry and Meghan, and to speak of his love for them as they build their new life in America. So I think it was really important to him that he talked about all of those points in this historic address.
Julian Payne, stand by. I want to bring in Mark Phillips, who has covered the royal family for years. And Mark, I know that you, of course, have followed now King Charles throughout many decades now. What did you make of his remarks?
Well, I thought it was an extremely comprehensive and effective speech. It struck all the notes that you would expect it to. It paid tribute to his mother in very heartfelt terms. It talked about his dedication to carry on the same sort of dedication to duty that she had exhibited through her 7-decade reign. It talked about what would have to change in terms of the housekeeping of royalty, so that formerly Prince William now becomes Prince of Wales, which of course is the traditional title of the heir to the throne in this country. But there were two, I think, very personal elements to the speech that he really didn't have to do, but clearly chose to do, and chose to do in very strong language. One was the dedication to the Queen Consort Camilla and the reliance that he's had on her for the period that they have been together, and inspired him to continue in the role as he goes forward. The reference to William and Catherine, as she's known to us, was also one that he has to make because, of course, William is now the heir to the throne, and there are certain prescriptions, formal prescriptions. The reference to Harry and Meghan, I think, can be interpreted as a reaching out. There has been a lot of talk about the distance that has grown between Harry and the rest of the family, a lot of suggestion as to what might happen when the Queen passed in that relationship. This, to me, seems like a reaching out to Harry and Meghan, while still recognizing that their life is one now being lived in California across the water. I think the express he used was to express the love to Harry and Meghan as they continue their life overseas. That isn't something that he had to do, and it's something that'll certainly make headlines.
No doubt, indeed. And Mark, I understand that we're learning more about how the Queen spent her final weekend.
Well, we've learned in one report about the last few days that she spent at Balmoral, in which several people have reported that she seemed very with it, chirpy. It was one description that we heard, but it also turns out that the local vicar, the local cleric who was brought in to deliver a sermon at the Royal Chapel over the weekend, had a couple of meals with the Queen then in the palace, and he talked about, of course, she's a woman known for having had great faith, her lack of any fear, her not looking forward to, but her acceptance of the hereafter, with mentioning, of course, that there was as imminent as it proved to be, but that she was very much at peace with the idea of being at Balmoral, which was her favorite place, and that whatever would happen, and she was entirely okay with that.
Yes, and that devotion to duty that King Charles talked about was evidenced in her working to the very end, welcoming, of course, the new Prime Minister. And then I thought standing there in her tartan skirt with her cane and her sweater in front of the fire and smiling broadly at the work that she does. We should also mention that the first public memorial for the Queen will take place in Scotland, where her long life ended, and Elizabeth Palmer is outside Holyrood House in Edinburgh, where the Queen's coffin will be brought over the weekend. And Liz, walk us through the schedule for the coming days.
Well, it's going to be a whole series of events, a lot of very solemn pageantry. At the moment, the Queen's body is still at Balmoral, but it's expected shortly, perhaps even tomorrow, to be driven in a procession roughly 100 miles from that country estate that she loved so much here to the Scottish capital, and indeed to the royal residence behind me, which is called Holyrood House. There have been people coming to lay flowers all day. They're behind me, probably half a yard deep now, stretching all the way along the wall. Once she has rested in Holyrood House, there will be a procession to the great Gothic cathedral here in Edinburgh, St. Giles's, and a special service. During that service, there'll be something called the Vigil of the Princes. It's where the children of the royal family stand guard in a ceremonial sense over the coffin. In the past, it's just been the male members of the royal family, but perhaps this time Princess Anne will be included in that group. After that, the Queen's body will be flown to London, and that is going to be a multi-day lying in state in Westminster Hall, which is in the heart of the Houses of Parliament. And the palace says they're expecting hundreds of thousands of people to want to file past and pay their respects. So the lineups are going to be miles long, probably, and that will take place next week. After that's over, and it will last several days, 4 probably, then the Queen's body will be taken to Westminster Abbey for the grand state funeral, the royal funeral, and then finally she'll be laid to rest in Windsor next to her husband, Prince Philip, who died last year.
Elizabeth, you did that schedule beautifully and succinctly, and gave everyone a wonderful preview of what's ahead. I mean, and as you can see, I mean, behind me here at Buckingham Palace, there are thousands and thousands of people here, and they were here late last night in the pouring rain as everyone wants to pay tribute to the Queen and get a sense of, as in many of these cases, be around other people as they are mourning and marking this particular moment. I want to bring in Roxana Saberi because she is outside Windsor Castle and has been speaking with people there. Good evening, Roxana.
Good evening, Nora. A steady stream of people has been coming by here as well outside Windsor Castle, where the Queen spent so many of her childhood years as well as her more recent adult years. Some people have been taking photos, videos, or just standing in quiet reflection. But it's on the other side of the castle where people have been directed to lay flowers, and there are thousands of bouquets there, as well as several cards that have been left behind. Some people have been seen hugging. We also saw some people crying. And what strikes me as really interesting, Nora, is that the crowd here is diverse. I spoke to some immigrants who said they didn't grow up with a monarch, but they are still in mourning. I spoke to an 85-year-old woman who lives nearby who fondly remembers driving to London in 1947 to wave at the Queen on her wedding day. And there was a 9-year-old boy who said he asked his mother to bring him here so that he could lay flowers. You know, King Charles just referred to the admiration and respect that his mother inspired, and some of the cards that we saw outside on the other side of the castle reflected that inspiration. One card said, "Thank you for your service. You were the glue that held us together. We are diminished without your loving and kind influence. Rest in peace, Your Majesty." Nora?
Roxana Saberi outside Windsor Castle, and Julian Payne is with us. And for many Americans who are watching this, of course, Windsor Castle has been around for a very long time, but they most recently know is where Harry and Meghan got married.
That's right.
Yes.
That's absolutely right. A very special day, and it's often said that when the British royal family does pageantry, it really is a spectacle, and that was an incredibly special day, a beautiful blue sky day, and a day of celebration really for everybody in the UK and of course around the world.
And what did you make of King Charles? Mark Phillips called it an outreach, but it was also just a mention of both of his children. You could be viewed it as just as simply as that, mentioning his children and where they were in life.
I think what's interesting about this is there are many people that try and put words into the mouth of the family, and actually the family very rarely talk about themselves. So you haven't seen the king speak about his son very often because he tends not to talk about his family. So what we've seen is a natural expression of love for both of his children, and I think that is perfectly natural and to be expected. But I think it's important that when he's making this historic address that he does speak about his love for his sons, his love for his wife, and of course his love for his mother and father as well. It felt very natural to me, I have to say, but as your colleague said, I've no doubt that lots of people are going to be speculating furiously about that for days to come.
We talked about people at home in their living rooms watching, and of course members of Parliament suspended their eulogies to watch this, and we are told that many of them could be seen wiping away tears during the remarks. This is a country in mourning.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of people that talk here at the moment about being overwhelmed with sense of emotion just out of nowhere, and these moments, and you see these crowds here, but in every town and village around the country, people will have their own memories of the Queen. They'll have their own thoughts about the future, and it is an emotional time for the country. You can absolutely feel it.
For you too?
Absolutely, I feel the same as everybody else. It's been an emotional time, but you know, I also have a real sense of hope. And listening to the new King's words there, I feel very optimistic. Actually, that as we move forward, we have a new sovereign who is absolutely clear in what he is here to do. The duty and service will continue, and I feel very reassured by that.
Julian, thank you for joining us on this very historic moment. We appreciate it. Let's now take a look at a public memorial service that is taking place at St. Paul's Cathedral, where some 2,000 people, including Prime Minister Liz Truss, is attending in remembrance for the Queen. Our coverage will continue on CBS News streaming, your local news, and we will have much more tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell in London.
Now is always on.
Get the Channel 3000 app, activate the push alerts, and we will send you breaking news, traffic, and weather alerts as it happens.
The Channel 3000 app. Get it now.
Powered by News 3 Now.